He's an associate professor with the Department of Chemistry, IIT Kanpur, since 2003. Before this, he got his PhD from Princeton University in '94. And before this, he was in TIFR for 5 years. He's Wellcome Trust Senior Research Fellow. Wellcome Trust is an organization in UK which sponsors research in medical areas, and they have sponsored Dr. Devbrat Goswami. He has won many awards and honors, including the prestigious Swarn Jayanti Fellowship in 2004. He organized the 2006 Quantum Computing Conference in IIT Kanpur. And he is currently writing a book on nanocomputing. Professor Goswami.
Thank you, Love. It is often very difficult to stand up to such kind of praise and be able to deliver, but I will try my best. Most of the things that we talk about are essentially often done by the students involved. So funding agencies are as important, I think, as our students, and so I list them here to start with. Fortunately, we have a good mix of undergraduate and graduate students in IIT Kanpur, and that was perhaps one of my driving forces to come from TIFR to IIT Kanpur, which is a primarily UG plus PG based institution. TIFR, a great institution, has only graduate students, which makes people like me having experimental requirements lack in manpower. Anyway, I will just start off with 1 or 2 slides to bore you, which will go back into the very beginnings, but then I will stick to my strong point area. As Sharlekar pointed out, it is best to keep ourselves to the parts where we know the best. So I am going to talk mostly the quantum aspects in regard to measurements, which is often the last step in the quantum computer. And if you do the measurement observation, the system always alters its state. And that is one of the reasons why quantum computing actually is quite difficult. And whenever you have a qubit, for example, the simplest case, whenever you make the observation, it will collapse to either one of the 2 states, 0 or 1. That is the basic idea. Turns out, in this talk, and since my specialty is in photons, I will stick to why photons are good qubits. Technically, any subatomic particle can be used to represent a qubit, for example, an electron. Photon is a convenient choice. It is an electromagnetic wave in one of the representations, and that can be taken to our advantage as we go along. So as qubit, you can think about it to be holding a single quantum state. It can be in any of the mixture of basis states. Typically, the polarization of a single photon is used as a qubit. So we are used to the rectangular basis of xy coordinates. So we represent 0 by the horizontal direction and 1 by the vertical direction of the polarization. And any mixture of that ends up being the state that are the photon states. Having said that, when we do single photon based experiments, then we are truly doing the quantum computing or the quantum based aspects, as Grover correctly pointed out. And only today, or in the late years, we have been going down to single photon limits. However, there are cases, and the measurement therefore essentially brings about the concept of, for example, plain simple light which comes out is a mixed condition, and there is a possibility of getting 50-50 of either of them. However, this kind of a measurement only gives us statistical averaging and does not give us single photon aspects. What we are talking about is slightly more specialized, where instead of scattered light, if we use lasers, then although the number of photons is larger, we can look at the states and deal with their coherence aspects. And here is an example which is now from an experimentalist lab. So what I will do, I will give you some short shock treatments in some sense. I will start from basics, suddenly give you some jolt of an experiment which is at the highest level, and then bring you back to normalcy with the flow again, so that you can get to see how things which are a very highly difficult experimental stature stuff kind of gels up with the ones which are very simple from the basis. So here is an amplified laser having high enough intensity in the pulse that if you use a lens to focus it, even the air breaks down, and so an invisible light beam, when focused through a lens, looks like a white dot, which is the point where air is being broken down, and what you generate is all colors which include the visible region, so you can see it. So this process is known as supercontinuum generation, sort of known as explosion of the wavelength at very high intensities, and that somehow preserves the coherence. This is of quite a lot of importance in communication technology because it has such a high bandwidth which is coherent, so that you can use all those wavelengths. But on the same token, this being a coherent process with a lot of photons, question which arises is whether these photons are of any use or has any correlation to the polarizations that I have been mentioning. To start with, therefore, what we have done is to see whether the polarization of the incident radiation is able to distinguish between the process itself. So here are a few experimental results which are plotted with the simplest case of the polarization being rotated by a quarter wave plate. So the experiment is this, that you have a polarizer and an analyzer, and you have a wave plate which is rotating the plane of the axis of the light, just like this. So if the polarization is being rotated such, and you are only selecting one of the components, say the vertical versus the horizontal, how does it affect the white light process that is being generated, which is highly nonlinear, as I said. It depends on extremely all the high order electric fields, not the linear fields. You still find that there is a wonderful correlation to the polarization of the light of the linear field to the process itself, and it nicely correlates to the cosine squared law, which is the linear field. And this sort of takes home the point that even having many photons in a particular case can give you quantum information if looked at properly, as long as coherence is maintained. The key word again remains as coherence. So all the previous talks here has always alluded to the principle of decoherence, which is an important problem in this area. But here is an example to see and understand how this is. Next, I jump off to a slightly more different area, which has not yet been discussed here, which is an experimentalist approach to quantum computing, which can perhaps be slightly better in some sense compared to the original definition of quantum computing. In this case, what we say is that we are looking at an adiabatic quantum computing process instead of the traditional definition of quantum computing. The difference here being that we are going to implement it exactly the same way, but the procedure here in this model is described by continuous time evolution of a time independent Hamiltonian with limited energetic resources, an aspect which is often neglected in unitary gate language. In the unitary gate language, you are only interested in the initial and final conditions. How you reach there is not important. In the adiabatic process, it is important that you do it slowly, so that the character is never able to, are never in sync. That never happens. I'll give you a better example soon. This is mathematical, let's give it up. Here is a better example. you have the polarization vector oriented in one direction. Don't worry about the equations which have gotten messed up with the computer changes. But the point here is that if my vector is pointing upwards, the field vector is able to precess around and bring it down. So this is the polarization vector created in the qubit space. For example, it's a spin half system which can point upward versus downward, and you have applied a magnetic field. It could be electrical field, it could be magnetic field, doesn't matter, any of these fields will do. As in NMR also the same picture works. As you move the field, it sort of precesses and goes around with it. If this process is not very rapid, then it is adiabatic. And this was first given by Feynman, Wohlford, Hellman, based on the block vector picture. So when this is slow, then this is adiabatic, and this gives a situation where you can evolve the system from being under linear field case to a case where it is under very strong fields, so that things are under the control of the radiation or photon field rather than the system itself. So herein we are trying to include the term of selectivity or control on the system. One of the most important aspects of quantum computing, as was also shown by Grover in his implementation of the algorithms, was to go through selective processes, selective inversions, selective gates. All these processes involve selectivity. So in order to build in selectivity in the qubit system, you would like to have a parameter which can give you the selectivity. Here is one of the parameters, which is the photon field or the radiation field, which takes you to the rest state picture and lets you give some control. So here is an example of an adiabatic rapid passage. For a simplest case, you would generally, when you have, if you don't have this adiabatic process happening, system is going to evolve all right from ground state to excited state in some random fashion. There will be a probability of it going into the ground state or into the excited state, and that is what is known as Rabi fropping in NMR language. And but if you do this process slow enough with high enough intensity, strong field, then it evolves into only one of the states, and that is the control that you get. So here is an example in a simple two-level system. Again, it is synonymous between NMR or polarization field, laser field. As long as you change the frequency of the applied field slowly enough, then it is, but faster than the relaxation time, natural relaxation time, the system evolves itself. So here are the first experimental evidences of this process happening. You can see oscillations versus inversion happening. So the next head-on question which comes is the concept of decoherence. I will briefly point it out to here because I have shown this slide many times, these couple of slides. So, but for the case that who have not seen it, I'll just defend it here. Decoherence can be of many kinds, and whatever may be the decoherence, you can always consider this to be at time scales which are still which can create trouble for you. So you take any system, take any model, you will always have a decoherence problem. And it can be simply looked at, in this case this is some molecular system, but you don't have to have it that way. You can have the qubit state and the bath state. Whatever be it, you have the state which is of interest and the other states which could be simply the bath states, which can take away the excitation process into decoherence. And our job is to try to find out how can we minimize this. That is one of the issues in all the spectroscopies or all the techniques that you apply. One of the ways of avoiding this is to use something known as a half-passage principle, where you put both the states in such a condition where they are in coherent superposition with each other, so that they evolve together without losing the coherence. Okay, that is known as adiabatic half passage. So there are theories which you can go through, but I don't want to get to. We have shown that it is possible to be done, but it's an experiment which is still to be demonstrated because it's very difficult in terms of field strengths and things necessary for the molecular systems. But mathematically it can be shown to be an experiment which can perhaps be done. And it is also possible to generalize it to Taylor series expansions and all that. And you can make it much more complicated than the simplest system to show that it still works. And the other thing which you can do in the same stream is you can say that you can apply an experimental Hadamard gate in a highly mixed up system by applying a field which will reset such that all the coupled states, all the bright states or the ones which can be qubits are all having equal superposition. That is one of the requirements of, let's say, the Walsh-Hadamard gate which Grover mentioned. So this is one of the kinds which you can implement it. And you can come up with all kinds of multi-qubit gates in these kinds of logics and sequences which you can put together and show. So the important point here in terms of quantum computing therefore lies in the fact that you would like to have a control on this coherent light matter interaction. And this, by the way, has another term which has been going around in terms of coherent control. This sort of merges the fields together. However, it needs something which is known as ultrafast pulse shaping, because you want to do things in the time scale which is very fast, and you want to have certain specific envelope profiles or phase which is going to change or evolve the system in a certain particular way. So you need a complete control on the applied field. That in itself is a technology in its own. Fortunately, I was a part of this development in my graduate school, where I developed this acoustic modulator based pulse shaper, which can take any laser pulse and put in a programmed condition. You can get out the shape pulses that you need. In fact, you can close the loop. That is one of the things which Professor Anil Kumar was mentioning in terms of his NMR schemes, which is also possible. But time scales there being in radio frequencies, it's much, much easier to do, whereas here we are talking in femtoseconds. Those are in microseconds. We are talking in terms of femtoseconds, 10 to the power minus 12 versus 10 to the power minus 6. So that's 12 to 14. So that's the problem in time scales that we are having. So one of the things which works to our advantage is interferometers are very efficient. You can just set up an interferometric scheme where you can put the light together and look at it. Other reason why you need to have interferometers is these kinds of very short bursts of light cannot be measured except you have your self clock. You cannot measure it with any other clock. So interferometers act as very useful self clock. And this is a typical laser lab. And what you see is that you have a wavelength and its corresponding time component. Similarly, wavelength component and time component, according to Heisenberg's principle, you have a width associated with each of these shorter and shorter time width because of the uncertainty, and so on and so forth. You can talk about lasers this way. But one of the things which is essential in terms of having control in any of the qubit systems that we are talking about would need to be nonlinear. You cannot have a linear system and say that I will be having enough control knobs which will give me a good control over the system. So you would like to look for a nonlinear system. How do you know about the nonlinearity of the system, and how do you defend nonlinearity, or how do you determine nonlinearity? One of the quickest and easiest way of doing it experimentally is to actually increase the field intensity into the system, into the material, so that at a certain point of time the field intensity is high enough that E squared, E cube and all these other terms become important over the E term, the linear term. And that's where you can actually measure how these parameters look like. And here are some of the experimental results which show that we can measure it. That's just to show that we can do it. So this is a sort of an elaborate setup where you change the power of the laser as well as put in a sample and put through the intensities. And you can find out that there are, these are our colleagues' help, that they can make magic molecules which are very high nonlinearities. So, you know, these things exist. That's good. Then there are these other kinds of molecules which under certain field, light field activation gives rise to very nice conditions where the nonlinearity is very high. So either taking an approach of molecular synthesis, or otherwise you can get to systems which have very high nonlinearity. There are issues about measurements. I will not get into details on that because that's not important here. But generally these are measured by these techniques where the signal to noise has to be high enough, and what we have been able to show that we can measure at values which are currently the best as of now. But that's slightly more involved. Let's not get into that. So you can actually get regions over which nonlinearity will be very high. That gives you an advantage as to what kind of a laser source to use. And there are different ways of measuring it, but let's not get into. Okay. Now let me concentrate on a given system where I would like to show you that as it is possible to control nonlinearity, or talking about nonlinearity in terms of molecular situations, it is also possible to look at it by plane optical field. And here is an example of it. This system shows nonlinearity on its own because of the molecule. Now what we do, this is the measuring technique. I don't want to. Now we change the field. What we do is that we say that we no longer come in with the transform limited pulse. We come in with a light pulse which has the field changing. Once changing from blue to red, red to blue or blue to red. And is there any effect of this field intensity changing on that on the process, nonlinear process that we are looking at? Now this is a different question asked. This is the photons which are now asking the question, depending on their character, is it going to change the nonlinearity? And here is how you do it experimentally, and what we find is, it is indeed true. Well, we had to go through a lot of techniques to finally say that we had that scheme. This is how the pulses look like, and we change them, and here we see that changing the character of the, so what we have just done here, let me explain in simple terms. I have a pulse which is transform limited in the sense that this is, the bandwidth of the pulse is determined by Heisenberg uncertainty. That is one pulse. That is the case where it's a very short pulse, 100 femtoseconds, and that gives me some value of 2 photon absorption process, which is nonlinearity, let's say. I now say that within my pulse, my frequencies are arranged in a given way or not. That means I am having more information about that laser pulse. That means that's a longer pulse, and it is also not exactly as Heisenberg principle uncertainty bandwidth is. It's different. And we find for the same parameters, exactly everything is the same. I have just changed the way the colors appear. I can change my nonlinearity. Now this is a very important switch or an important aspect, because this is one of the parameters that we were looking for. As you are looking for control knobs, this is another parameter which you are looking for, where you can use the light field to actually use that. Something has happened to the equations, but anyway, if you now look at how these Hamiltonians look at all the times, then we write down our Hamiltonians and all these equations for Schrodinger's equations or all those. Whenever we make a measurement, it is the diagonal elements which make sense. The off-diagonal elements are the ones which carry the connectivity or the coherence profiles, but we do not do much with them. Does it make any sense to look at it? So what we said is that it is known that the off-diagonal elements are the ones which carry the coherence terms of the system. So what we have just now done is actually said that we want to look at the off-diagonal elements, which is the coherence terms. In other words, the hidden information that we say is the power of the computing in quantum computer sense. And we find that just by looking at that, we can tell what is going on. And the thing which strikes from all this is that any spectral information has both real and imaginary part. There is a famous Kramers-Kronig relationship which relates the real part to the dispersive aspect and the imaginary part to absorption. That means if there are two states, when the two states are connected physically, that is absorption. That's the imaginary part of the spectral content. Whereas when we are talking about the real part, then it's the dispersive part. That means my population between the two states are not getting mixed up. it turns out that the Rabi flopping or the conventional NMR and all these techniques essentially couple through absorption. That means my physical two states are involved. That's why your decoherence is so complex, and that's why it's so important to talk about decoherence there. In adiabatic processes, the coupling occurs through the dispersive part. There is no absorption process involved at all. The off-diagonal elements of the matrix is telling us that. It's just that we never looked at it. So there is no population flopping. The system essentially is doing the job, but the population is never retained in the other state. And that is one of the key elements of this work. In fact, if you are not adiabatic, you see an amazing flopping between the real and imaginary part happening. But once you have become adiabatic, it just goes and becomes one of a kind only. So that is one of the things which we have just found out, which seems to be a very important issue in this field. This is typically how our systems look like. That, by the way, is my hand, which shows how the spectral content is looking like, and when we put in our modulator, it cuts off parts, it makes multiple pulses, and we can delay them and do all kinds of things. There are actually, as Professor Grover mentioned, other aspects to this work, which I just quickly touch here. This is just to say, even if quantum computing does not occur, even if we don't get a quantum computer in the next few years, what are all these science good for? It has many, many impacts. One of the most important impact what we are trying to do is the optical analog of MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. That is because the concept that we are developing, as you saw, was so much based on the ideas of NMR, and we are actually trying to look at their connectivities or the off-diagonal elements or the issues that are looked at. We are trying to look at the connection, and this is the reason for our foray into medical fields, where it so happens that as you pass a pulse of light through the materials, like our brain, it becomes wide as it goes through. This is electrical engineering problem. Dispersion takes over, and that's why if you are looking at your multiphoton images, it is not very effective when you go deep tissue. It's only 1 centimeter that we can go down as of now. That is partly because as it goes through about that 1 centimeter, it has essentially become a very long pulse, and it cannot do that excitation anymore which you were looking at otherwise. So here is our image. What we have done, we have shown here that but multiphoton is always better than confocal, which is the single photon results. So we show here the contrast, how good the contrast of a multiphoton image could be with respect to confocal, where you see a lot of bleaching rather than the image itself coming through properly. So if we can do multiphoton or we can improve upon confocal, that's a much better issue. And these are issues that we can deal with these lasers, where we can look at fluorescence issues. And these are also things which go back and give us control. So they are all connected. For us, it's the one and the same thing that we are doing. It's just when we talk about quantum computing, it becomes quantum computing. When it talks about magnetic resonance imaging or related aspects in optics, it becomes that. So what we have shown, we have been able to show here is that a conventional confocal laser scanning can also improve much better currently just by using a very high speed acoustic modulator. That's what we have been working on, and it increases the contrast enhancement. So our technology that we have developed also has application in that field. Pulse laser case also, there is a lot of advantage because you can select out certain pulses, and as long as the gaps are gathered, you can get better images. Although the enhancement is not amazing because it's already multiphoton case, thermal effect is much lesser. We also have things like optical tweezers. The advantage of that is that you can hold on to a single object with the light field and then manipulate that, and that gives an additional advantage of position or stationing in space, not just in time. That's the other thing that we can do. So in summary, what I have tried to do is I have tried to give you both molecular and an optical approaches to enhance two-photon processes, and we have shown that both are successful schemes. Higher sensitive two-photon techniques are allowing us to explore some of the other aspects of structure and other things. However, similar correlations to fluorescence measurements are showing encouraging trends in terms of medical applications. The imaginary terms of the off-diagonal elements of the density matrix imply population exchange in Rabi flopping, which is a fundamental issue currently. Real terms in the off-diagonal elements in the density matrix, no population exchange, but state character change only, and that is the reason why adiabatic process remains to be a better approach. Currently it looks like, at least for experimentalists. And with that, I will show you members of my group in a much more relaxed environment, and we are just actually trying to get this whole thing to work in a feedback condition, so that like what Anil Kumar was mentioning, that we look at the result, try to see if we can make it better and feed it back to the laser system and write the algorithm for us automatedly. Thank you.